good morning, or good afternoon, depending on where you are joining us from, and a warm welcome to all. You've joined the third technical session for Module 9 on social media, in which you'll learn how to create engaging social media campaigns for museums. This module is brought to you by the Digital Empowerment Project for Small Museums, a nationwide initiative organized by the 6 U.S. regional museum associations and dedicated to providing free, self-paced training resources for small museums. This inaugural series of online trainings and resource toolkits focused on digital media and technology topics is made possible by funding from the Institute of Museum and Library Services. My name is Zinnia Willits, and I am the Executive Director of the Southeastern Museums Conference. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a light-skinned white female with shoulder-length reddish-brown hair. I'm wearing black-rimmed glasses that are often referred to as cat eye style. And today, I'm wearing a white short-sleeved blouse with tiny black polka dots, and I'm sitting in my home office with a backdrop of a desk and a few computers behind me. As the host for today's session, I would like to convey a few things to our attendees before we begin the program. First, in this era of virtual meetings, when digital spaces may substitute our physical sense of place, it is important to reflect on the land we each occupy and honor the indigenous people who have called it home. Today, I'm speaking to you from Charleston, South Carolina, the historical homelands of the Natchez Cusco peoples. Wherever we are, let us acknowledge all indigenous nations as living communities, their elders, both past and present, as well as future generations. We ask you to reflect on the place where you reside and work, and to respect the diversity of cultures and experiences that form the richness of our world and our profession. Thank you. And now for just a few housekeeping notes before we introduce today's presenter and get started. First, the best place to view this session in real time is on the Museum Learning Hub website under the Watch Live tab at museum-hub.org. Here you will be able to see all the captions, chat, and others' questions. I would also like to acknowledge today's American Sign Language interpreter, who will be on the left side of your screen, and let you know that captioning for today's program will be embedded in a box just below the YouTube player on our website with controls to adjust your experience. The best way to continuously refine our programs is to listen to our attendees. We ask that you share your candid feedback with us. Following today's program, you'll be sent a link to a satisfaction survey. Sharing your experience through this survey will only take a few minutes, and it will greatly improve our work. We encourage you to pose questions to our presenter, which will be addressed at the end of the program after the presentation. Please type your questions in the chat, and a team member will be gathering them. We'll address as many questions as time allows. However, we may not be able to address all of them, and other questions may arise after reflecting on a program. For this reason, we have set up an online community forum for raising questions, posting answers, and connecting with your fellow museum practitioners on the Museum Learning Hub website, which again, you can find at museum-hub.org. If you're looking for help between programs, please visit this forum, create a login, and post your questions. A member of the community or one of our student technology fellows will get back to you. Finally, to stay connected with us and be aware of future programs, please follow us on social media. Links to all of our channels will be posted in the chat. Now it is my pleasure to introduce today's presenter, Jessica Johnson. Jessica is a creative strategist at Snap Inc. Prior to beginning work in the tech industry, she was an award-winning social engagement producer at the Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture. Jessica holds a master's degree in journalism from Temple University and earned her Bachelor of Science in Fashion and Textile Management at North Carolina State University. Jessica has worked in multiple industries, including fashion, higher education, and advertising. She is interested in exploring practical uses for new media and finding new ways to communicate across audiences. Jessica is also passionate about fashion history from the African American perspective and activating archives in the digital world. I have enjoyed getting to know Jessica through this program, and I'm thankful for the time she has devoted to this session. Now I'm pleased to turn the floor over to Jessica Johnson to get us started.
Hi, everyone. Um, as she said, I'm Jessica Johnson, and I'm going to be teaching you today about creating social engagement campaigns that really wow your audience, but also create community alongside showing your objects and just showcasing all the best that your institution has to offer. So let's get started. All right, today we're going to just talk about strategic planning, the look and the feel of your campaign, how to launch it, and then after launching and completing, doing a self evaluation. So, we've all heard this before, or many of us have. Those who fail to plan, plan to fail. This is especially true when doing a campaign. Um, I'm not sure if you've already watched the earlier technical sessions, but the very first one does talk about how to create a strategy for your social media channels. If you have not participated or watched that, please do because it has some really great, valuable information that sets a ground, like the foundation for how you can make amazing campaigns. So just building off of that, we'll start with what type of campaign are you doing? That's pretty much the first thing you always need to do and evaluate when you're looking for how you're going to make an amazing campaign. There are a number of campaigns you can have. You have an always on evergreen. That's your everyday content. That's, sharing your museum objects or telling about your programming. There are event and live programs, which are like things like today, or they could be even just community days at your institution. There's also opportunities to have campaigns that are partnership and multi-institution, where there takes a lot coordinated effort, and also new acquisitions, exhibitions, and special projects that your museum or institution may be doing. Um, and it's important to remember again, each campaign needs its own social media strategy, but you should look to your main social media strategy as your true north in completing this. Because your campaign strategy, it should complement what you're already doing and not add any additional like kerfuffles, if so to speak, to what you have going on. So it's important, again, have your true north, but you can incorporate new ideas and you should scale for bandwidth. That's going to be critical, and we'll talk a little bit about how to do that in just a bit. So, questions to ask once you start: who, what, when, where, and why are the things that I like to say we look at first. Who is leading this project? Which department is it? Or is this something that is coming from an outside person and you've never worked with them before? I think one of the understanding who you're working with is critical in making sure that you're developing the campaign best toward your schedule and your cadence and your bandwidth. If you know that you're working with a department that is maybe short staffed or hard to get a hold of, build in time. That helps build in time for anything that may come up. Understanding the goal of the campaign is also very critical. Um, how can you know if you are successful if you don't know what you are trying to accomplish? So, what is the goal? Is it fundraising? Is it awareness? Are you trying to get new museum patrons? Is it list building? Or are you just trying to let people know, like, hey, we have a program going on? Are you promoting something? When is the campaign happening, or when is the project happening? Another important thing to note. Not only because you need to put that on the marketing or in the campaign, but also for your calendar. Noting, okay, if this project is happening, let's say on today, December 16th, what else is happening today? Is it National Pizza Day? Or I don't think today is National Pizza Day, but just thinking around like what else is going on. Is this a major holiday? How do we expect people to be interacting with our content on this day? Are there any conflicts? And where is this happening? Is it in person or is it online only? Or is there a mix of online and in-person activities going on? And why? The why. Why is this important? I love to ask the person that is, if it's an outside, person, if it's not me, the social media team, making the campaign, or really pushing the campaign, if there's an other department, I always ask, why is this program important, or why is this object important? um, I will say that sometimes that can be received in a negative space, but I think it's important to ask, because when the curator or the education team or whoever you're working with can tell you why something is important, that helps you communicate to your audience why they should be interested in what you're doing. Um, Other questions that you should ask are, what is the outcome? Will there be an exhibition? Is this a long-term thing? Is there a recorded program? Can people tune in later? And this is important to ask for a couple of reasons. One, so you can have your language right in all of your marketing, but also because if there's something that is going to be ongoing or live in perpetuity, you don't have to fit the campaign into your calendar immediately, and you can fit it in where it best fits for your schedule and for all the other things going on at your institution and online. And what is available for social media use? This is very critical when doing social media campaigns for museum objects and exhibitions, especially. I think that sometimes the assumption is we can just throw anything on the internet. We have the object in our collection, we can put it on the internet. But I have learned sometimes the hard way, unfortunately, that you cannot just throw whatever on the internet. You need to check all of the agreements. You need to understand exactly, how can we use this? What is standard museum use? Does that extend to the web and the internet? And does web and internet extend to social media? And once you understand that and you know exactly, okay, what you have, do you have objects? Do you have images? Do you have video? This will help you really develop a campaign that is well thought out and well rounded, but also showcase all of the things that you have to offer for this project. And are there any sensitivities that should be noted? 9 times out of 10, hopefully there won't be anything that's extremely critical, but there will be times where there are challenges that you have to face when it comes to talking about an object. Um, I think that, history museums really run into this more often. And I think that it's one of those beautiful things, though, because you are hoping to start conversations. This is a great place to go ahead and get that started prior to the internet. And then you can also you can have the conversation with your colleagues. You can prepare yourself for how you're going to talk about the object or the topic on the internet. And you can also develop a list of answers to some hard questions that might be asked, and some canned responses related to any type of crisis communication that might come up. And the questions that you should ask yourself or your team, these are my favorite because it's like a self inventory. Again, I think social media, as previously working in a museum, I think everyone thinks like, oh, it's so easy. But I'm sure everyone watching has a different story to tell when it comes to how easy even just a Twitter post is, right? They can take up to like 3 hours to make one post. So what are you asking yourself? Who else is working on this with you? And what else are we working on? What is our team doing? What is our bandwidth? And then once you establish an understanding there around what your other projects are, what priority level is the campaign? Is this something that we can flow in? Is it just like, oh, there's a program on Thursday, we hope to see you there, that we can flow into the content, once or twice in the week before? Or is this a longer lasting, an exhibition type of campaign? Or is there an object that's only going to be on display for, a few weeks, and you want to generate interest around that? Are there elements that we can mix into our evergreen content? So our already established plan that we have, our strategy, with our daily or, weekly posting? Is there something that we can swap out so that we're not doing double work and this will fill the void there? Um, and the other questions that you might ask, are we working with internal or external partners? Like I previously mentioned, the who can be um, a challenge if it's internal and external, depending on your working relationship with people, their bandwidth as well. And I don't know about you all, but my calendar has just been busy, busy, busy lately. So nailing down even time to go over campaign details can be tricky. So who are you working with? What has your previous working experience been like, and how can you account for that in your planning? I think that that's as up in the air as that can be. I think it's pretty critical to go ahead and plan long lead time, because you really, you're setting yourself up for success. The person running the campaign is being set up for success versus like hinging everything on the department that is supplying the information and not really going to be in the active portion of the social media campaign. And based on the campaign goals, what do we know will work and what do we want to test? If you know things work for you and your audience responds well to certain things, I think it's great to build those as a great foundation for your campaign. You already are setting yourself up for success if one, it works, and two, you have the formula figured out. You can, it's not necessarily plug and chug, but it is definitely something that requires less work effort in that sense. And then, is there anything you want to test? I think campaigns are the best place to try something new, because they can fail and nobody will really notice. So, if, say, we want to venture into Reels or TikTok, right? But we're not sure if we can do that regularly, like with our regular content. Campaign is a great place to try it because you get to test out on a specific subject matter. Um, and you don't have to commit to doing it long term. You can just do it for, the amount of time that this campaign is going on. And lastly, how will we report? Are we going to be doing a large debrief at the end with all teams? Or will we just simply do a one pager and send an email out noting how the campaign went? So some do's and don'ts in your strategic planning. Really take an honest evaluation of the full ask. I think, we often are given huge, goals with the ask, and sometimes they're not realistic, right? So because you're the expert in social media, it's okay to tell someone, "Hey, this isn't really realistic, and I'm going to be honest, we might not be able to do that." The honest evaluation is critical in saving yourself trouble down the road later, burnout, and also in producing the results. I think it's great to plan to your minimum viable product. What can we do at the very like bare bones that will meet the need, but also not overextend us, right? I like to give people the this is what I know we can do. And then I set a personal stretch goal for myself and say, it would be great if I could add this in, but I'm not going to commit to doing that to somebody or for somebody or for a campaign, because that is more so like, if I know it's a stretch, I'm potentially not going to meet my goal, versus if I, plan to goal and I can over deliver on what I promised, then that not only does it make you look good in your colleagues' eyes, but it also relieves a lot of pressure on you to make all these things happen. Like I previously mentioned, after you take an honest evaluation of the full ask, be honest. Be honest if something isn't realistic. Be honest if something is not going to go well with your audience on the internet. I think that these are, difficult conversations that are really valuable in the long run. In my personal experience, I know that telling someone no does not always get the best response. And so I just always remind people, like, it's not no, it's just not right now. And I'll say why, because this isn't the right climate for that, or I just don't think our audience is going to be interested in this particular, event. But is there something else coming up that I might be able to help you with? And that way you're not, turning off your partners, because again, you want to have a great working relationship, to make these campaigns really go. But you're at the same time, you're using your expert opinion, not only just as the social media person, but the person who is navigating the audience and knows them the best, to let a colleague know, like, hey, I don't think we'll be successful here, or hey, we're shooting a little too high. Let's bring the goals down to this, and we can be successful. Um, so I think some don'ts are: don't create a campaign that includes everything in the kitchen sink. Like I said, minimum viable product. What can we do? And then what can we personally set as our secret stretch goals to over deliver, under promise and over deliver, right? Don't say no unless there's absolutely nothing that can be done. And it's not, again, it's not no, it's just not right now. And don't hand over your social handles or anything without training staff or pre-approving the content. I think that is possibly one of the biggest things, because if you're the expert and you know how your audience, reacts to people, or, talking about certain topics, you don't want to have somebody get on and not be in the right voice, or say things that are maybe like too high level for the audience to understand. Um, and you also, you want to protect the integrity of your social media channels. You have worked so hard to develop a strategy, a brand voice, these guidelines, create a real relationship with your audience. And you don't want to, mess that up because you handed the reins over to someone who wasn't fully aware of how it was, how things work on your channels. So now we're going to get a little bit into the looks, because they do matter. So I think all successful campaigns have very strong looks and feels. I like to call it a look and feel because, your museum or institution likely already has a brand. It likely has like a guideline that it follows, right? You already have logos, so you're not creating those. But what you are creating is a special look and feel that can identify this campaign separate from your regular content. Or if it's your regular content campaign, it's just making it very, clean and noticeable. And so, like, the when your audience sees, whatever you've produced, they know it's you without even having to look at the name or the at mention handle. So your look and feel should align with your brand guidelines, and your social media guidelines. And you can, get inspiration from social media, other museums, just lurking around the internet, being on Behance. It's a great website that has a lot of examples and inspiration. Or you can just peruse through Canva as well. And I'm not sure if anybody's used Canva to create their, visuals for their campaigns, but it is a great resource, and it is free 99. So I definitely recommend, tapping into that resource and seeing how it might work for you and what you have going on at your institution. And don't forget to lean on what will be available to help you direct your content, right? So, going back to that, what are we sharing? Do we have videos? Do we have, are there all black and white images, or are the images horizontal or vertical? Keep that in mind when you're developing your look and feel, because you don't want to create something that just, it looks beautiful for one thing, But then when you go to a next object, it doesn't work and you have to start back at square one. So if you want to make a great templated design, keep keep it in mind that you'll want to bend and flex what the piece looks like in it as well. And so now we're kind of going to go into a one of my favorite projects that I've worked on. It's from our Hidden Herstory campaign a few years back at the NAMOC, and it's this is just I'm going to walk you through like how we came up with the look and feel. And so we'll go from start to finish. So our design for Hidden Herstory that year, we wanted something to be very clean but bold. We knew that we would be working with lots of black and white images, but we still wanted to have meaning. So I'm just woke up one morning checking my emails, and I saw this amazing email from, I think, Business of Fashion. And the people were in black and white, and they were cut out, and they just had simple blue shapes. And so I was like, oh my gosh, this would be great. So how do we make that work for our campaign? I saw an image by Micheline Thomas, and there was this beautiful coral color and a woman. And I said, "Oh, this is it. We'll do shapes and coral to bring this campaign to life." We also used a little bit of blue because the coral and the blue just paired very nicely together. And so here we go. So as you can see, I started with my basic shapes, a rectangle, a circle, and a triangle. And I also pulled together some mock images of how it would look if I had a, horizontal photo or a vertical photo. What if a person, if the vertical photo doesn't take up the entire image for the Twitter card, maybe I'll include a quote, and you'll note that like the quote, it just says amazing quote goes here on my mock-up. But that was the font that the museum used. So it was still in alignment with our brand guidelines. The colors were different because it's, the campaign, we wanted to stand out, but we're, staying true to what our brand guide is. We have our logo, we have the font, and our images there being prominently placed, but not changing what the image is or the look and the feel of the actual piece. And you'll see here the campaign ultimately came to life in this way. We again cut out women, based, because it was Hidden Herstory, and so we were a very women focused campaign. And so we cut out the individual women to have their portraits be on these geometric shapes, and stand out on top of the coral. But you'll also notice that sometimes there was not necessarily a woman that we depicted, but an object. So if there was a pin, how might we display the pin? And we did it in the same way. Again, using, our simple shapes, our, staying true to that look and feel that we previously developed, but we didn't make it too crazy. It was very clean and it got the message across. And I'm just going to take just a second to get a little bit of water right now. Sorry about that. Thank you. So like I said, it was very clean, and how that clean look comes across is just beautiful on the internet. It really stands out, and your audience, I think, really will hone in on what that story is you're trying to tell, that visual story, but also that object story or that person story, which is what most of museum social media is doing. We're educating on the internet. We're doing it in such small and abbreviated ways, but making very large impact. And so the best way I've found to make this happen again is to stick to the brand guidelines, to be very clean and clear, um, and just to feel what you're doing, feel the work if that's possible. And here's another example of how this came to life. This was actually a video, and we used, again, the cutouts, we used the fonts, we used the same treatment of the coral to bring it to life. So our do's and don'ts here. Um, do think outside of the box, right? Like shoot for the stars, aim for the stars, and then scale it back down. Make it fit. Not necessarily make it fit to anything that's, one dimensional as far as your brand guide totally it has to fit this completely. No, it can go outside of that, but also make it fit your skills. If you don't have the ability to produce videos, then, don't lean into that, right? Lean into the things that you can do, which might be, again, just a picture on top of a square and the logo, but you've got the same color story going on. Make it clean and make it fit. Do develop a visual story that supports the assets that are available to you. So if you're working with things that are mostly in black and white, those pop on bright colors. Whereas if you're working with objects, those might be a little bit more difficult because they're they're not necessarily beautiful photographs. They're sometimes photographs that are like, how do I make this work? So I like clean backgrounds. Those work well on white or a black, I think. Um, Seek inspiration from outside of the museum field. We're telling stories as museums and institutions, but so are so many other people, and they're taking the look from a different angle. So I love to say, like, I'm from the fashion world, right? Like, fashion is my thing. I grew up wanting to work at a magazine, and so whenever I am approaching a campaign, I honestly look at it from a more fashion lens than anything else, because that's really where I get most of my inspiration and creativity from. And then if you're just having a hard time, ask a friend to brainstorm. Ask the team that you're working with or your partners to brainstorm. I think bringing in people and new ideas and perspectives is a great way to get some new innovative things going on with the look, with the feel, and honestly to elevate the experience. And make templates. Templates, templates, templates. That will save you so much time when you're in the campaign, especially if it's a long running campaign that has a lot of pieces. Some things you don't want to do is force it. If something is not working, that is okay. It doesn't mean that you're failing. It just means you need to like go back, relook at the design, maybe do one slight tweak, delete something, or add something. Usually deleting something is the best thing though. And don't stray too far from your organization's brand guide, because again, you want it to be in line with all of your other content you have going out. And don't overcomplicate the design. Again, if it's not working, you might just need to delete one piece and have a clean design, and it'll be perfect. So now that you've, developed your campaign, you have your strategy and you have your content, it's go time. So how do we make this happen? I think a coordinated launch day is the best thing, like, since sliced bread, if you ask me. Um, Tools really make it easy to launch everything at 8 a.m. or whatever time you find is best for your audience. So just double check that, you've done all of your due diligence in spell checking and fact checking. Make sure that you've done your due diligence when it comes to the credit information that needs to be included on, pictures, objects, again, any acknowledgments if there's something on loan or if this was a gift from, a patron. Make sure that that information is included somewhere, whether it be in the copy of your social media post or on the graphics that you post with it. Um, Schedule your posts to launch at a certain time, and you can do this the night before so you're not scrambling the morning of. And make sure that your posts include relevant hashtags for tracking and for virility. That's one of the best things on the internet are the hashtags, because people who are not necessarily following your content might be following the hashtag and they'll see your content. And that's how you get new people in your audience. So don't forget you've already developed your strategy. Don't get to launch day and think, oh my gosh, I haven't done this. I haven't done this. No, it's okay. Just take a moment, breathe, and go with the strategy. You're the expert. You've done this before. And even if you haven't done this before, it's okay. You've developed a plan. All you have to do is stick to it. And ask your museum friends and your audience to help. It's like free to retweet someone. And so I always just say, hey, friends, we launched this today. Could you help me out and share the word? And people love supporting others, especially when they know how much hard work you've put into it. So you can just do a simple ask to your friends, ask to your colleagues. Make sure you retweet the museum today because we're launching this, and make sure you tell your colleagues that are running the program as well about the content so they can share it with their networks. And then if you're doing something that's like a larger campaign, social media toolkits are really amazing in easy ways to get the content shared. It does take a little bit of extra time on your part, but it really helps. All it is an email to your museum friends. I like to call them museum friends, but your colleagues and other sister institutions and anybody else that you know. You can also post the toolkit to your website for people who want to support, but you might not be in contact with them directly. And the toolkit will just include a bit about the campaign and the important dates, like if there's a program that goes along with the campaign, or how long the campaign is going to be going on for. Include the hashtags, include your at mentions and the other at mentions of the participating institutions, and 2 to 3 images for people to share in case they don't have something in their collection that goes along with what your campaign is, so that they can just schedule that tweet or Instagram post or Facebook post and get your word out for you as well. I think that again, asking, it doesn't hurt anybody to ask, and 9 times out of 10 people will say yes. And if they say yes and they forget, they'll go back, and then you have your campaign living on uh you know more and more days, because maybe somebody forgot, but they were like, oh, next week I can do this and it's still applicable. And maybe it's not the top of your list, but it's come at the top of their list. And so your word is going to get out. So you've launched, you've run your campaign, and now it's time to evaluate, how did you do? This is the bread and butter of creating great campaigns. You only get better from here, right? And that's through evaluation. So, following the conclusion, make a report. Have your general metrics together, like your likes, your comments, your shares, the engagement rate, which, you might want to know your engagement rate as a small social media team, like to yourself. And you might not want to share that with others because it can look a bit convoluted when it's, a 0.2% engagement rate, when if you have thousands of followers, right, then it's going to be very high to get a whole percent. It's going to be a hard reach to get a whole percent, right? So what insights did you observe? Did you notice that on certain topics, the audience talked more or had more conversation? Did you notice that black and white photos did better than color photos? And how many of your hashtags were used, or like what was the rate of use for your hashtags? And in the reports, I also really love to include screenshots of the content that was shared, because I've noticed in my experience that while we do a lot of planning with our colleagues and we, work together to make these campaigns come to life, when we're done and the campaign is in motion, um, the project is complete for everyone else, and they're, not necessarily checking in. But so they don't know how it looked on social. They don't know what the post ended up doing and looking like. And by including the screenshots, you're reminding them like, hey, we stopped at this point, but our team picked it up and we kept going, and this is what it came to life as. And it's just a nice, way to share like your finished product, because even though social media, everyone can get on it and everyone can go check, a lot of times people don't, and it's not necessarily because they're not supportive, but we're just all busy and going. And so again, I like to just make it real for all teams by putting the screenshots of the content there. Um, in addition to your regular reporting evaluation, I also like to suggest a personal reflection. So regardless of how the numbers were, the metrics, how do I feel? Is this a project that I'm proud of? Did this campaign make me feel good, or did it make me frustrated, or you know how do I feel? um, what piece of the campaign am I proud of most, right? Like, if the campaign didn't necessarily go as well as you'd hoped, it doesn't negate that you did, work. So, what are you proud of? Are you proud of the fact that you even made it to the end? Sometimes that's the best part, right? Especially when it's been a very long campaign, like a special exhibition that might be up for a year. Um, we made it through to the end, right? And then what were some challenges, and how can you or the team improve next time? So thinking about those things, right? Um, if I worked with a certain department and I know that they're, difficult to get in touch with because they have a lot of projects going on as well. How can we improve next time that we work together? What planning can we put together in advance to make sure that we're accounting for that time that we were unable to get together? Or was the challenge finding out the appropriate credit information? Or I'm a big fan of using resources from across the digital world, right? So is there was there an archive, a digital archive that I accessed and I didn't do it in time to get the approval to use their image or their object, versus like, had I reached out a bit earlier, maybe a month earlier, if I had that time, could I have had, all of the objects and pieces that I wanted to include in the campaign? And the most important part of everything that you do, please take a moment to celebrate. Celebrate you, celebrate the team, celebrate your success. Even celebrate your failures if you failed, right? Well, we're not really going to call it a failure. Celebrate your challenges if there were challenges, right? Because at the end of the day, if you are not recognizing the work that you're doing, you cannot expect anyone else to. So please always celebrate yourself. Do something kind for yourself, like give yourself a hug or a pat on the back, clap for yourself, because, we're all here and we're cheering you on, but you should cheer you on too. And so my final tips and takeaways: create a plan, make it look pretty, but also trust your experiences and your expertise. You are the person who is doing the work. You know the audience well. You know how this social media game goes for your institution. So, just trust yourself. Campaigns, they look great. And they're pretty much the same thing as your original strategy, just with like niche topics. So you can do all the things that will be successful, and trust that it will be successful. So if you have any questions, you can contact me. My email address is listed here, hello@jessicaejohnson.com. You can also follow me on social media at _Jessica Elise _ on Twitter, or connect with me on LinkedIn. I will be 100% honest with you all. I do not always talk about museums on my social media. I think it's very much a space to talk about museums, and I do love conversations around museums, but I also love to remind people that we are also not our jobs, and it is great to interact with everyone just as our human selves, right? And not always work. So if you're interested in like just chatting, I am down for that. Again, at underscore Jessica Elise underscore. And thank you. That is the conclusion of my presentation, and I think we have a bit of time for Q&A.
Thanks, Jessica. That was great. I actually laughed out loud at the under promise, over deliver because I say that all the time. And it really is such a, I mean, it's such a simple, especially when you're trying something new. So I appreciate that you brought that into the presentation. We do have some questions to get to about some of the things you've talked about. So I'm going to dive right in. This attendee would like to know, is there a difference in approach to creating social media campaigns for special events or exhibitions versus like selling memberships?
Yes. There's definitely a difference in approach. And I think also knowing what the guidelines are. Previously working in a federal space, we had to be really careful with how we were asking people to donate online. So you definitely want to make sure that you're looking into that as well. But I think that the approach is different. So for events and exhibitions, it's easy. Like you have a date, a place, and a time, right? And you're sharing your things. When you're approaching people for donations or like anything advancement related, I think it's best to not just, well, I mean, obviously we have to do the ask, right? And that's kind of the most uncomfortable part, is asking for the support, but how you ask for the support. So I think my favorite strategy for working on advancement campaigns are to show the work that you've been doing, right? And then, or telling a story of an object,
Mm-hmm.
and then saying, and then making that gentle ask at the end that's like, continue to help support this or this initiative, right? You know, become a friend of the museum and learn more about these objects and stories, or help us continue to tell these stories, because it's less like, hey, we need your money, right? And more like, hey, this is a community space. Come be a part, work with us, help us grow, help us share.
That's really great advice, especially for those of us that operate on membership-based organizations. But again, showing visually or through case studies how the value is added through a social media campaign is really great. This one just came in. Do you have any tips for juggling multiple campaigns at one time?
Yes, I mean, I think like I said, the priority list is very critical. So if you know that you have so many things going on, but there's something that it can wait till like the next week, or um a week that has a few, less posts going out, I think definitely do that. But if everything, I don't know if it's just like when I was working in museums, but everything is a priority, right? So if everything, if
To
everything
someone, yeah.
priority, my best answer is to say, well, what are your priorities, and how can we flow that in, right? If you know that you have an always on evergreen content campaign that it some days doesn't need to happen. So like every day we don't have to share an object, or, this day in history or things like that. We have those, but they're not necessarily, you can kind of skip them. They're not so critical that they're going to, really mess up your engagement or your cadence or throw your audience off. So you can opt to swap things in and out. If you have a lot of campaigns that are maybe events, I like to say, hey, you know what? We have a ton of events this week. Let's put all of this information together. So instead of saying, having a post for like each individual program, maybe there's one graphic that has, the date, the title of the program, and the post says, we've got some amazing programs this week. Learn more on our calendar, with a link to the calendar, right? Because we're
Mm-hmm.
in a digital space, so you don't have to say everything. Like linking out is completely fine. And you have a website for a reason. It houses more information, right? That's where people really truly go for that information. So anytime you can link to the website, I always recommend doing that, especially if you have a beautiful drop down card on your like for Twitter, because then you don't even have to make a graphic. Like it already pre-populates for you and it takes like part of that workout. Um, I would say like combine as many things as you can, then set your own priorities. Because the other things, like again, you're one person, your channels are one person. Um, and you cannot, I like to always say, like, you cannot just look like all over the place. Like, we have to look cohesive on the internet. We have to be saying some type of story. So if I know that my morning post needs to be a history post, and then at lunchtime, maybe that's when I'll do my event post, like, at least I'm setting up a cadence to get everybody acclimated and we're looking kind of together and not all over the place on the internet. Then do it that way.
Yeah, especially if you have a team working on multiple channels. A museum I used to work at, each one of us did a different social media channel. So we would get together each week and try and create that cadence. It didn't always work, but I love the idea of pre-planning. So I guess in some ways, this next question piggybacks a little bit off of what you just said, but what are ways to create long-term campaigns rather than reacting to events on a one-off basis? But I think that's what you were
Yeah,
saying.
so the long-term campaigns, I have a lot of experience with those, especially long-term campaigns that also have like intermittent programming going on with them.
Mm-hmm.
The way that I like to do those or, flow those into the calendar are that technique of like figuring out, well, are there places on my evergreen content calendar that I can flow some of that information in? So say maybe a person that's in the exhibition, it's their birthday, and instead of doing like a, exhibition focused post, I can do a today in history post, right? And it still lends itself to that exhibition and that content, but it's not necessarily completely tied to it. I think that's how longer term campaigns can do best, because you're not feeling as forced into just talking about that all the
Mm-hmm.
time. And then spacing that content out. If the exhibition is going to be up for months, as long as you're putting out at least like one post a week, I think that works well. And that's again, that hashtag is key for that as well, because if you're talking about it and maybe the look and feel changed a little bit, or your today in history again fits that campaign, but isn't necessarily completely related or tied to it, you can still throw that hashtag on there and be carrying out the campaign needs.
It's great advice. Um, okay, we probably got time for maybe two more questions. This one seems to come up in some way, shape, or form on all of the social media programs that we've done in this module. So we'll see what your response is. When is it appropriate to engage people in the comments? What is the level of professionalism versus casual language that should be used?
I think this is a great question. So at this National Museum of African American History and Culture, we were super huge on engaging in Twitter and on comments and things like that. We responded with GIFs. The Purple Heart was my favorite. And I think it's completely up to you and your brand voice to determine that, right? There's no right or wrong answer here. And as far as the level of professionalism, I think, again, your brand voice. If your brand voice is very professional, then I would say stick with that. But if you're more of a casual, type of voice on the internet, a friendly voice on the internet, it's completely normal to be a friend in the comments. I think when we're talking about museums, we as the social people at museums or people who work in museums, we know that it's a building, right? But our audiences generally look at us as a person, as a
Mhm.
friend. And so I think talking like a friend would talk, is completely fine. And I think it also just it makes people feel good, right? Like your favorite museum just liked your comment and said thank you, or
And
like
responded to you.
Yeah, like it makes people feel really good. And I also like if you have a typo and somebody, calls it out in the comments, I always used to say like, "Oh my gosh, thank you so much for catching our error. We'll update that immediately." Because I think, we're people. We make mistakes and typos happen. And it's important to remember, like, to let the audience remember that as well. Like, hey, we're still just people over here. Like, yes, we're a museum, but um, we're people on the back end.
Yeah, again, that's great advice, and it sort of goes across channels, and just brand voice and situational, and appreciate that. So this last one, I'm just curious what advice you might have. But the question is, how is building awareness at a small museum different? How can we build more museum awareness for smaller museums through the social media campaigns?
Okay, I think this is a great question because I'm coming from a very large museum. I know that our awareness was kind of built in, right? So for smaller museums, I think it's going to be critical to just share your objects and always have your like logo or a picture of your building um, front facing on that, right? For awareness campaigns, you definitely want to submit who you are early and like from second zero, right? If it's a video, second zero. If it's a graphic, make sure that your logo is like prominently placed, not necessarily taking up the entire picture, but just prominently placed. And another awareness tactic, I know we're always working, or many of us are always working on like shoestring budgets, but sometimes just putting like $5 or $10 behind a post, um, to let people, to target people in your area. Because if you're smaller, you really want that community support. And the community support is what's going to help you not only get your word out, and that's who's coming to your events, but it's going to help you grow online as well and digitally as well, because those will be the people who do follow and retweet you. And then maybe their followers will as well. So I think second zero when it comes to the logo and any, things that define who you are. But then also maybe just a little bit of pay to play because we're just, we're kind of in that environment now. And unfortunately, like that's kind of how it is. I think the time for organic awareness growth and attaining audience um, it does not exist anymore, right? So
Well, again, I mean, it's solid reality-based advice for everyone who's doing that right now. So thank you so much, Jessica. So many great takeaways from this presentation for everybody out there working on social media campaigns or thinking about getting one going. Really appreciate your time, and thank you to all who are on the call with us, who attended this session. Really great tips for engaging social media campaigns. So we really appreciate that. So just a few final reminders from me to go ahead and close out our program today. If you enjoyed this program, we hope you did, please do us a favor and share it with your network. Let others know that these recordings exist. And we really appreciate your participation and hope to see you in the chat for future programs. After each module, and this is the last technical session for Module 9, so we're wrapping that up, all 4 of the videos that we ran this month and all the prior months actually will be available on our website, as well as a complete toolkit of resources provided by all the presenters who have been with us in the last few weeks. So stay tuned to museum-hub.org for more information on those toolkits and for upcoming events. So please remember to visit the forum on the website and ask any questions that we may not have gotten answered today. Follow us on our social media channels for the Museum Learning Hub. And please do complete the post-event satisfaction survey. And then finally, please join us in the new year on Thursday, January 6th. This will be the introductory session for Module 10 on digitizing 3D collections. And this session will feature Daniela Larson, who is the Executive Director of the Hutchings Museum Institute in Sarasota Springs, Utah. and she's going to share her journey as a small museum practitioner with digitizing the museum's collections. So we're looking forward to kicking off Module 10. Can't believe we're already there in 2022. So thank you all for attending today's session. I have enjoyed being your host for Module 9, and I hope that everybody has a fantastic rest of your day. Bye.